Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Audrey. I'm a content analyst with CCW Digital, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by our colleagues from Sutherland, and we're going to be talking all about why healthcare experience platforms and initiatives don't always work out. And so this is a really exciting conversation because we're talking about the cutting edge of AI and where everything is intersecting today. And talking about some of these examples of where it's adding value, where it's maybe causing friction, and everything that goes along with it. So just to kick things off, I'm really happy to be joined first by Jimmy. I'll let him introduce himself now.
Sure. Thanks, Audrey, for the introduction. And it's a good day, everyone across the globe. My name is Jimmy Guest. It's great to be with you here today, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. A little bit about me. I sit in the technology office leading digital enablement practice focused on customer experience and next-gen engagement centers leveraging AI and ML to create a sustainable competitive advantages with healthcare emphasis, of course. I have perspective on all business verticals. With that said, I am passionate about healthcare with the transformation trajectory I'm seeing and Rajesh is seeing as well. I'll let him speak in a minute. Seeing that space where AI can be an enabler. So again, it's great to be with you all today. I've been really excited for this presentation, and Rajesh is my colleague and counterpart on the client partner side. So Rajesh, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Rajesh Reddy. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I am the head of solutions and strategy, customer success leader for healthcare vertical at Sutherland. I spent my entire career working within healthcare industry, both supporting payers and providers, and excited to be here to share our perspective on the AI implementation across within the healthcare industry. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that for Rajesh and team. Once again, I hope this conversation will land you some possible things to look forward to and pitfalls to miss as you plan your AI journey. But this is the headline. This would be like on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, right? That could kind of define what we're trying to do here. And I'm just going to read a quote right here. Most AI healthcare customer experience programs fail to scale, despite promising pilots. Why is that? The issue isn't the technology, but how it's deployed. And we're going to go through this presentation. We're going to identify 5 critical factors that we've seen that's been prohibitors of realizing your customer experience journey with AI, and then some of the ways you can address them. So we're not going to just observe the problem and love the problems, but we're actually going to show you what they are, what we're seeing, the top 5, and we're going to walk you through how you can kind of get around some of those hurdles. Okay. So before we begin, if you allow me, I'd like to ask a simple question. How many organizations here have already experimented with AI in some sort of fashion in the last 18 months or 2 years? I can't see everyone, but I imagine that most of the hands went up in the room. Out of those hands are up in the room, let me ask you a second question, right? How many of those pilots have fully scaled across your enterprise and delivered the ROI and the enhanced customer experience that you originally envisioned? That's usually when the room really gets quiet, right? And you're not alone. Again, I've seen everything in every single vertical, not just healthcare. You're not alone. But the key takeaway is here is that you really need to start with envisioning and defining to understand what the customer experience should look like from a patient, provider, and payer example, regardless. So again, we know AI works. There's no question about that. It's really the deployment of AI that's in question. And that's what we're going to walk you through step by step today to hopefully give you that planning. Okay. So these are the 5 problems, right? These are not the solutions yet, but I'm just going to kind of define them first. And then after this slide, I'm going to turn it over to CCW just for some real industry stats around patient or just customer experience, I should say. But these are the five failure patterns I see on a daily basis working with some of the top brands globally across the world in healthcare and other verticals. We should take lessons learned. The first 2 are the most important, but they're all equally important, critically important. But if you don't get the first 2 right in this sequenced order, you're really going to have some hard challenges, okay? Some of the most failed pilots I've seen is really when they led with technology first rather than an experience first. So you don't really want to lead with technology here. You really want to lead with the experience that you want for your journey with your patients, customers, providers, and payers. And we'll kind of get that in a minute. And then the second pillar, if you will, is kind of related to the first one, is fragmented ownership. Many scaled pilots or implementations that did not scale across the enterprise was mostly related to the point that there was not one single accountable owner or lack of stakeholders that they brought to the table to do it collectively. Again, we'll kind of double click into that later on. And then I'm sure a lot of folks here, whether you're technical or in the healthcare space, can really relate to poor data readiness. So all this information resides in different systems, scheduling systems, EHR systems, learner systems, clinical information. All this data is distributed, fragmented across your enterprise. So it's really hard to envision how you're going to bring all that together when you consider security. Have some ideas around that. And also the data quality is something you really need to understand that. For example, if you run an AI over scheduling and your scheduling data is out of sync or not good, then you're just really going to produce a poor output. Once again, we know the AI technology works, but we just want to make sure that you understand all these things you need to do beforehand in place before you launch your journey. The fourth one, I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, workforce management and resistance, the change management around deploying AI. You get some resistance, and we've heard the quote, and I'm probably going to misquote it, so please but I think you'll get the point. You heard the quote that AI will not replace your job. AI will replace those AI replace those jobs with those folks who not embrace AI. So it's really more of a building up a trust and bringing them to the table as a stakeholder in that journey. Again, we'll talk about it later. And this last one, and I'm sure, again, I asked a question right at the beginning, it's like, who's been experimenting with AI the last 18 months? I'm assuming most of the hands went up because we've all been playing with it and really get excited about it. But you really have to factor in upfront, the governance after the fact. You do not want to put in governance and security after the fact. You really want to plan for it ahead of time. And if you allow me to make one analogy, if you will, like when you go to the beach on vacation. The first thing you see or first thing you do when you go to the beach on vacation is you run straight to the ocean without looking at the tidal flags, right? Whether it's green, yellow, red, double red, or God forbid, purple for marine pests, right? So you want to avoid those things ahead of time and make sure you have the right plan in place to prepare for any kind of obstacles that may be in your way. And one stat I like to quote from our chief digital officer at Sutherland that he just mentioned the Google platform. AI will represent your organization. So there's ethical concerns around that. There's legal concerns around that. And one quote that did come up recently was last year, there are 700 companies that are facing legal issues because of misuse of AI. And we expect that to almost triple in 2026. So again, we'll get into the details of that in a minute, but you cannot use governance and security as after the fact. You really need to plan for it ahead of time. And if you will, at this point, I said we'll go into each one of these later in the presentation. But before we do that, I would like to ask my friends over at CCW to kind of take their word for it, what they saw in 2025 from a patient experience or a customer experience initiative that you're seeing out there, some of the challenges. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Rajesh. I have some exciting data from late last year that I wanted to share with you all, just about the sources of friction we're seeing in healthcare for the patient as well as the provider, as well as kind of what's driving AI investment and AI initiatives at a really high level. So just wanted to run through these kind of 7 main points to kind of set the stage, hopefully, for just the state of things currently in healthcare experiences. So we know that the top objective for patient experiences is, it was a tie. It was one that patients feel a consistent sense of humanity and empathy in their experiences, as well as finding it easy to work within the processes. So I think that really speaks to, the two sides of healthcare experiences. Obviously, we want to feel, like as people, want to feel understood and cared for, but also just everything needs to make sense. And, we all know that healthcare is historically very tricky to navigate, and there's a lot of friction inherent within the system because of how many steps there are. So those are the 2 goals or the 2 top priorities for patients across the board. Another kind of dimension to that is very similar to what we see in customer experiences in, retail and consumer spaces, that long wait / hold times are the greatest source of friction. So 72% of patients say they experience long wait times or long hold times. And the runner-up is getting in touch with a live person continues to be a challenge. So I think what we can see here is that these kind of logistical areas of friction continue to dominate the patient experience. And I think that can sometimes draw focus away from where the care is and where, we should be focusing our attention. On the provider side, the top source of friction is filling out the same information in multiple places, which is something we see reflected across all consumer industries as well. We have agents who are putting information in many different systems and finding that to be frustrating. So it does reflect the industry as a whole. It's a challenge that we're all kind of facing right now with the amount of technology and the amount of disparate systems that a lot of contact centers and contact folks are encountering. I think another one that's pretty interesting is 47% of leaders cite that the restrictions on the information that they can have be accessible via self-service due to regulations and other rules is the greatest challenge in making patient experiences digital first. So we know patients want, the option for digital experiences. Many of them prefer digital experiences when they have the choice, but leaders and providers alike are really seeing a lot of difficulty in making those experiences accessible via self-service, or at least accessible with the amount of regulation. And obviously, that's something that's always changing. So that continues to put pressure on folks. And then 25% are citing a lack of clarity into the different information accessible from different entities. So obviously, we're all very familiar with healthcare, but there are a huge swaths of patient populations who don't know that their insurance is different from a provider network or something like that, where they're kind of expecting the type of service that they get in all other dimensions of their life, and then when they're not able to get that in healthcare, they're kind of starting off on the wrong foot. And that continues to be something that I think we're going to see in coming years. Moving on to number 5. So this probably isn't that big of a surprise to you all, but 96% of leaders are transforming their healthcare offerings to support an increasingly digital native population. So, despite the kind of 4 things I just mentioned about the struggles and the hurdles we have to face to get these experiences working as easily and seamlessly as possible for patients, we do know that the digitally native population is very big and growing every day, and will continue to be a main driver in how we set up experiences moving forward. And then kind of just wanted to end on a few notes about AI investment. So all of this data is available in the CCW Digital healthcare market study we ran last fall. It's on our website if you want to learn more about this. But basically, one of the top pieces of insight we got about AI investment from this survey was the quality and ease of patient experiences is outweighing the ease of provider experiences, 42% versus 35% in terms of the priority for AI investment, and then 24% cited the reduction of costs. So while it does seem like, in the news and kind of everywhere you're hearing about AI these days, that cost cutting is at the forefront, it is kind of true in healthcare that there is actually a much bigger focus on improving patient experiences as well as improving provider experiences before that initiative. So I think that is something that we should all keep in mind. These initiatives maybe aren't always, the primary goal isn't cost cutting, but I think that, as you see experiences improve and seamlessness improve, there's a huge advantage to these types of experiences over the competitors. And then finally, one of the top challenges to AI adoption for patient and provider experiences is that lack of clear incentive to overhaul systems at this particular moment. So I think a lot of us probably feel this way, but the daunting premise of overhauling an entire system, obviously very costly, going to involve a lot of moving pieces, a lot of stakeholders. It's kind of easy to pass it off to kind of a later time, something that could be tackled in the future when we have a better understanding of AI. But, I think what you'll hear today, and you'll probably be hearing a lot these days, is that the time really is now, because a lot of the groundwork that supports these really effective initiatives do need to be laid now if they haven't been already. And those are the types of steps that'll move the needle and move things towards progress, even if the AI investment doesn't take place today particularly. But yeah, that's kind of a very brief summary of a relatively long market study. So again, feel free to check it out. But I'll hand things back over to Jimmy to kind of talk about some of the stuff he mentioned earlier and how it all comes together.
So, Audrey, these research findings are very interesting, right? And it kind of resonates with me, and I believe everybody who worked in the healthcare industry will agree with these findings, right? What this shows, if I were to summarize it in 2 sentences, the friction within the healthcare is still very basic. The wait times, repetition, access, clarity, which means that the best AI use cases, at least at this point in time, are not the most advanced ones, but the ones that remove, these most everyday frictions, which is a huge opportunity in itself. But what we are seeing increasingly in the industry is, the, the the stakeholders try to pick the most complex problem and solve for it first, than attacking a narrow problem and building the capability from there. Thank you for sharing the research. Really interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you. Totally agree. I think the friction that we're seeing is, some of the more superficial, some of the more superficial areas, but those are the areas that are kind of having a
Yeah.
lasting impact in patients' memory, and the types of things that make them weigh one provider against another. So it's really interesting.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that, Rajesh. And if I could, Audrey, I think it's going to be a good time to pull the poll before we get into it, because I'm really curious, to what has been the biggest issue in your organizations, the biggest barrier to success, as it says there, for your customer experience initiatives. This kind of goes back to the 5 that I said earlier: lack of personalization or customer experience you defined up front, lack of collaboration between siloed departments, your data quality integration challenges, workforce adoption and trust, or even the compliance security risk thing. So I'll be curious to hear from the folks out there on the webinar what they have. There's probably no one singular answer, but I'm really curious to see where the bulk of it is landing, who's leading the pack for which one of these has been your biggest barrier to success. And while you guys are doing that poll, Rajesh, I'd like to hear your personal insight, since you're one of our major client partners here at Sutherland. What if you had to pick one of these? What would you say was the biggest obstacle to success of AI implementation with healthcare?
So, Jimmy, the top answer may vary, Jimmy, based on whether somebody's from the payer side of the things or provider side of the things or somewhere in between. But in my mind, when it comes to healthcare, the underlying pattern is usually the same: the data, governance structure, and the workforce adoption. I think majority of the votes we will see across these 3 choices.
Okay. All right, thank you, Rajesh. And Audrey, I don't know if you can show the results or if they're ready yet.
Yeah, I think we're just trying to make sure people can vote in them. So why don't we give people a couple more minutes to submit their response, and we'll send it in the chat to make sure everyone can see it.
All right. And then I would like to, your presenter mode, I want to go to the slide. Thank you. Thank you very much. And while you guys are answering that poll, Rajesh pointed on something. Again, I said we're going to walk you through all 5 of these that we saw the biggest barriers of success for AI implementation. And this is a framework we live by here at Sutherland. It's in our DNA. We lead with experience. When I say we lead with experience, we like to define what good looks like ahead of time. And what that means is you roll up your sleeves, you kind of look at the pain points, the friction points that Audrey kind of listed there on the CCW slide, and kind of map out your existing patient, payer, provider, member journey, and then re-envision some of those workflows to make a better customer experience. Because all the companies that I've been working with, those that win really start here first, defining what good looks like for a customer experience. And it's really just, it's really an agile framework over here on the left. This is our rapid innovation and design cycle of the infinity loop. You see, number 1, you start with the ambition, the insight, the journey design, and the roadmap. And that's kind of where we start. Sometimes Rajesh and I will go to San Francisco in our labs, our experience labs. Sometimes I'll go to London. When I say we go there with our customers, and we map all this stuff out, other friction points of how we think we could make it a better experience. Also in Bangalore as well, we have labs. Sometimes we meet our clients where they're at. or even on remote like we're doing here. You do not have to engage a third party to do that, but you can do this in-house I strongly encourage, the healthcare leaders here on this phone call, to partner ahead of time with IT and others across the organization to define that journey before you start implementing any of the technology. Lead with experience. Do not lead with technology. Define the experience, then understand how technology and AI will enable that. And the rest of that infinity loop in the dark blue, that's really the agile rapid application development cycle that we would do on the IT side. And then once you run that, once you have a little bit of data points and some insight how a pilot or implementation is going, you recalibrate that and say, wow, we really improved our containment, but our customers are still frustrated and giving us bad sentiment based on 3 factors. So then you can kind of readdress it with your envisioning and come back around it. So just understand what your customers want and need, and then design AI use cases to solve those, to be an enabler of those for you to generate that good customer experience. But cannot stress enough, lead with experience, not with IT. Define what good looks like, what success looks like. You can even put some metrics around that we can go into later if you like, of what to define success. So that's your first critical step, is innovation, as define your experience. Okay. The second piece, if you remember at the very beginning when I said there's five reasons why some AI implementations do not scale across the enterprise, or some of the pilots just do not give you what you thought you would on the ROI, and then frustration sits in, and then it gets put on the shelf. You never implement. If you remember the key point, we know AI works. It's really your deployment of AI and how you're leveraging AI is going to solve for it. So what I've seen that does not work and how we go about it is there's not one clear accountable owner that's running an AI program or a customer experience solve with AI program. So you want one person that's clearly accountable, who's going to be on the hook if something goes wrong or gets stalled. That doesn't mean you're running it by yourself, but you need to bring the rest of the business along with you. That includes CX, digital, healthcare, operations, IT's got to be at the table with you too. And then that's where you set up your governance around the project to get you on that successful journey. So it needs to be business led. Like if you remember at the top of the presentation, I said we should take the lessons we learned from major ERP implementations. No, ERP and AI are totally different things. However, they're big transformational technology improvements. So with lessons we learned with ERP that can be applied right here is that you just not lead it out of one office. You do not lead it out of a technology office. You do not lead it out of your healthcare office. It really has to be together as a business as a whole to get you to that successful end. This one is this slide. I'm thinking you guys can all hopefully it resonates with. This is the third one. Is data, fitness, and experience. And I can speak from personal experience. I'll give you an example on that here in a second. But none of us wake up in the morning, as a member or a patient, waking up saying, "Wow, I can't wait to sign on to 3 different systems, call 2 different doctors, sign on to 2 different." Go to a call center. They don't have any visibility in anything else I've done. You really want it in one place to have that good patient experience. So if you're measuring your outcomes on a good customer experience, signing on the multiple systems, data disparate, calling different folks to get to a conclusion as a terrible experience. And I could speak from my own personal experience. I just changed insurance companies. I used to be my wife's insurance company, and they had everything in one place. As a member, I could go on there, all this stuff you see here in the 3 columns here on the right, scheduling data where you make appointments, wait lists, provider referrals, clinical data, going back and forth with my physician assistants, nurses, doctors, whatever. I could see that one-stop shop. And the interaction data, even from like a contact center, call center type of perspective, I could see all the engagement, whether I emailed someone, whether I texted someone, whether I talked to someone. My entire journey was there, one-stop shop. It was a great member experience for me personally. But I know this is not easy. And I've talked to customers that says, yes, Jimmy, we really want to create a better customer experience, but I have all this data in different places. And we all know that you cannot just expose a lot of this healthcare data to the wrong parties, or then you have all kind of compliance and regulatory privacy issues around that. Now, if you don't mind, I was going to put on my techie hat on, but I was kind of arming you with some information when you do go talk to your IT folks, or excuse me, when you partner with your IT folks. Because the traditional model was, hey, we're going to take all this data from all these different systems and create a large data warehouse and a data lake. And then we're going to run AI over that. That still works, and it's still in practice today. But what I have seen, again, just to kind of give you a tool, when you're talking IT, what I have seen that's been faster to scale for companies with the same problem with fragmented data is that they're using APIs with governance and security around it. That way, when you create that great patient customer member experience, everything is sort of on a single pane of glass for them. And that way it just retrieves exactly the data they want, the minimum, exactly they want, nothing more, nothing less. But it's governed with security, and that way not anyone can see it that's not supposed to see it. And typically the only one that can really see everything is the member. And so again, I think this should resonate with everyone right here, the frustration, even from your transformation roadmaps that you're trying to work through, or even as a customer yourself, you just probably get really frustrated with this. So what I did, taking this input as I was preparing this presentation, these inputs on this data fragmentation problem, is I asked AI, I said, okay, knowing all these disparate systems, tell me what good looks like on a single pane of glass, right? And in less than 1 minute, this is a fictitious customer or member or patient, I should say, that it drew up. So I'm not breaking HIPAA or anything like that. So this is fictitious. But if you recall on the previous screen, all that fragmented data in the systems are over here on the left-hand side of a patient portal. And my eyesight's not as good. You got clinical, you got a one pane of glass overview. You can go into clinical information. You can go into scheduling information. You can go into the interactions I've done from beginning to end, and I can even pay my bills. And that's a good patient customer experience. Now, if you look in the middle, starting from the left, I don't have a pointer here, which says upcoming appointments. So Sarah Johnson, the patient in this example, has all her scheduled appointments there. In the middle, you have the clinical summary, whether it's hypertension, blood pressure, thyroid, cholesterol, whatever, it's there for her to see. And then all the interactions she's had, who she's talked to. And she can even go further to the right and pay her bill as well. And kind of going back to the data access, trying to solve for it with the ocean and bringing it all together is going to be difficult. So that's why you really need to leverage technology in AI and APIs to, when you bring up this patient experience, that you're making technology calls out, retrieving this information for that patient to view. That way, no one unauthorized will be able to see it and use that information and get you into client any kind of compliance challenges. And then last but not least on this screen, which I think is fantastic, is the case journey down at the bottom, the care journey, timeline. It just tracks your journey along the way. The appointments you had, some of the clinical diagnoses you had, the doctor interactions you had. It really brings it all together. And this is what good looks like. And this is what I wish I had with my current insurance provider, rather than receiving multiple texts and calls. I mean, at some points, I don't even know who's legitimate or who's not, but this is a unified patient view that good looks like based on everything we discussed. So if you got some questions, we could take those around at the end around this, but I hope this resonates as a good experience, something to think about when designing your customer experience. So okay. And now this one I know is probably a hot topic. I've seen it firsthand with customers. Is AI adoption. You really, folks don't want to embrace AI because they may feel like it's taking their job. but you really just got to be some really robust change management and communication around this, which means like, no, we're not really trying to replace your job. We're trying to automate the things that aren't as important. We're trying to give you more tools to generate a better experience for our members. And the way you do that is, if you recall the second pillar, you don't lead it out of one office like IT. You really lead it out of all the offices, the entire business coming together to define what good looks like. So you bring them to the table when you define your journeys and your experience that you do, because they know exactly where the friction points are. And that way they're vested in the outcomes of this, and they feel like they're really contributing to moving things forward. Because if you don't, there will certainly be resistance. And if there's not resistance, you might even produce the wrong outcomes and experiences that you're looking for in the first place. I'll give you one example. Again, my wife is a nurse, so I'm pretty close to healthcare. And she used to work at a company, and they use a workforce management AI tool that redid all the schedules for everyone, including the techs, the nurses, the LPNs, the doctors, the folks answering the phone. In the end, they just rescheduled everything, and not once was any of the teams engaged to say, will this work? They just assumed that, hey, I just take technology and throw it at the data, and it's going to do it to me. And in that user base said, oh my gosh, this is not going to work. You're not factoring in Mondays, you're not factoring in Tuesdays, or who's going to answer the phone for this, that, and the other. And when they deployed it, and sure enough, there was a lot of schedule friction, and there was consequences out of that. When I say consequences, the waiting room went. She was an ER nurse. The waiting room went from 50% occupied to about 125% occupied, because they just trusted the AI output of the scheduling, and the scheduling was all messed up. So once again, many reasons why you need to bring everyone to the table to define what success looks like. So I hope that resonates well with everyone there. And then last but not least, in healthcare, trust and privacy, integrity is your highest currency value. You guys all know this in healthcare. If you don't have that, everything goes downhill quickly. So you really need to be very transparent, build by design, not by apology, because if you have to come back around and apologize for the fact afterwards, you've already lost. So you really got to have this up front, to make sure there's enough security, enough legal emphasis on what you're trying to deploy. It cannot be an after the fact, because if it's after the fact, again, you may have already lost, and it could be legal and ethical consequences out of that. So I think this is very important here to do. It's kind of like running into the ocean example I had. Know what you're going to do, and make sure you understand, legally, ethically, that you are covered with these things. So, and one last example, kind of with this, I went to my new doctor's office, and the triage nurse came in, and she was a checkup. It was nothing major. And she goes, hey, do you mind if I record our interaction? And I said, great. No, that's fantastic. You're living in my world. And I said, as long as I know my data's secured and not going elsewhere. And she said, of course. But what it did, that recording, while I might have been there for just generic refills, it was capturing insights of what I was walking through that I might not even brought up. And then the AI would come in and say, oh, maybe we should check, his blood levels, or we need to check his thyroid, or we need to, check his hip, So that is bringing AI as an enabler to good patient experience example. But once again, to be able to leverage those type of things, you need to make sure your data is secure and private. And then we go to the next slide. And before I leave you here with some things, I know we kind of threw a lot of things at you, and I hope it's all resonating. This is what success looks like in practice. AI improves access resolution without increasing risk. Customers understand and trust the AI output. Staff adoption exceeds expectations. That's a critical one, right? So for your AI to be successful, your workforce base needs to be ingrained in it, and the adoption needs to be high, and you build that with trust. And executives can really clearly explain the ROI beyond cost reduction. I think you heard Audrey said one of the drivers has been cost reduction. Well, cost reduction, yeah, that's cost avoidance. That looks great, but if you're really measuring success on a good experience, you have to look beyond that, and an executive should be able to clearly articulate that. Again, just kind of repeat, just to bring it back calm here on the right-hand side of the slide. What are the 5 factors that represents the biggest opportunity to improve AI customer experience? And I think we just took a poll around that. I don't know if we have the results around that, but again, I would be interested to see the results of that. We can come back to that. And then if there's any executives in an office, I want you to kind of take this with you as we wrap it up and open the floor to questions. 3 things I want you to take away from here to remember. And it goes back up to the top of the call with the Wall Street Journal headline. AI failure is an operating model issue. It's not a technology issue. It doesn't matter what we know AI works. Doesn't matter what tools you have. Doesn't matter if you're using the best in class or you have the best partner. If you do not map out what you're trying to improve from an operational perspective at the beginning, it's not going to scale across the enterprise. So you really need to find that up front. And number 2, experience, trust, and governance are force multipliers. And I mean that is you really just zero in on these 3 things here, and that will get you to market faster to a better place with better results. So you really have to have those, else you're going to have some friction. You're going to have some bad sentiment, even on the customer side. So you really need to make sure number 2 is rock solid. And number 3, small shifts in ownership and design unlock outsized returns. And that's the example I was saying with the scheduling with my wife's company, that you really want to bring those that will be adopting AI to the table from the business up front, and make sure you have good ownership, equal ownership across all the pillars, primarily, the business side, the experience side, the healthcare side, IT, and security at a minimum. And then I think that will be it. And Audrey, I'll turn it over to you at this point to see where we go from here. But thanks for allowing me to have the time to present to you. I hope some of this will be valuable as you go to your next step of journey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jimmy. Yeah, I think this has been so interesting. A lot of things we could dive into. So we do have a couple questions, but before we go into those, just a reminder, if you haven't voted in the poll, we'll look at those results in a few minutes. So just in the chat, you'll see a new poll and just hit vote now. And yeah, we're just curious. Obviously no wrong answer. And then yeah, we are live. So feel free to also drop any questions or things you want to hear more about. And we have plenty of time to cover those. Obviously no dumb questions, but the first one we have is kind of an interesting one. So obviously some folks a couple of years ago would be asking, where do I start with AI? Now today we know it's well underway. So if you've already have some AI in place, what would be your guidance for those folks who already have that AI in place? Jimmy, I think you might have been on mute now.
I was on mute and it kind of broke up. Can you repeat that question, please? I broke up.
Yeah. So like if folks already have AI in place and they're kind of wondering, okay, how can I bring that together with everything I just heard? What would be maybe your guidance, your next steps? Yeah,
I think make sure that all those 5 factors we said at the very beginning, make sure that you can check those boxes, make sure that you consider every one. And have you clearly identified what success looks like? Is it enhanced customer experience? Is it data quality? And then you calibrate that, and then you put solutions then you put some stopgaps in place. I always recommend a crawl, walk, run approach. Targeted pilots on a segment of business, and make sure it works. Make sure you're getting the outcomes that you're looking for. Again, from what I've seen, I hope I'm answering the question. From what I'm seeing, that the most successful AI implementations, the companies that actually win in this space are those that really compete on experience and define that experience at first. If there's something, I guess one other thing I say, just don't measure success on cost cutting. I think the biggest factor of success is really centered around customer experience. So I would look at every one of those things we discussed end to end, and if there's something specific around that, I wouldn't mind diving into that a little further if you want me to. Rajesh, do you have any insights from your clients?
No, Jimmy, I think you covered it all.
Okay.
And then, yeah, thanks for everyone who voted. So I'll pull this up now. Hopefully we can all see these results. I think this is pretty interesting. Not super surprising to me. I do feel like the siloed nature of departments is a major issue across every industry right now. So not surprising that that's a challenge. But yeah, Jimmy, what do you think?
Yeah, that's actually not shocking. I was trying to think that maybe the lack of personalized insight at the beginning would, but lack of collaboration between siloed departments and the data quality itself has been really truthfully the biggest barrier I've seen many organizations have for a successful implementation. And again, that goes back to those critical factors of not having a single stakeholder that's on the hook, that's accountable for the outcomes of an implementation. And also you got to augment that with, really engaged stakeholders that are tied together, 2, 3 in a box approach. So you don't run out of, because ERPs, again, AI is a new transformational technology that everyone's talking about, everybody wants to jump into. But you can still take the lessons we learned from like ERP implementations. Most failed because they were run out of a CFO office or a CIO office or a CHRO office or whatever. It really takes the whole business working together. So how to crack that nut on number 2 is critical. Get a sponsor of one executive that's on the hook and accountable to that, and to make sure that they have buy-in from their stakeholders that are heavily engaged across CX, across IT, across your info security teams, and also your member provider data teams. So that's really critical, and not shocked to see that. And I know that's a kind of a tough nut, but you have to kind of go to your leadership skills, influence without authority, and reaching across aisles and create those dialogues to get on the same page, be very objective of what your outcomes want to be. And then the second one, or not the second, but the one at 33%, their data quality integration challenges. Yes, I've seen this firsthand with some major hospitals that we went in on the front side, just roll up our sleeves and say what good looks like a customer experience. If you recall in that one slide, I provided a single pane of glass. That is something they really kind of wanted to do, but they said, I don't know how to integrate all this data from different places. She goes, we have to get the data correct first, in quality, and second, how do we integrate it? They were thinking they had to create a huge data lake or data mart, but then again, this is another area where your IT team should partner with you to make sure that, hey, how can we integrate this data, for our members and our patients and our payers in a secure way? And there's a couple of ways to go about that, but I think there's definitely some new ways that you can accomplish that with your IT team.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great segue. Maybe we could talk a little more about that. We just got a question. Do you have any best practices to ensure to get your data quality in order smartly? So I think it was just what you're talking about, but maybe if we can go a little deeper there, I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, I can take that question, Audrey. See, when I think about the data quality, right? I think of it from a very focused and journey-led way rather than as a massive enterprise cleanup. What I mean by that is, if you take a payer or a provider journey, we shouldn't start from every data set that we own. Let's take new patient scheduling or a claim status, and the question that we should be asking is, what minimum data do we need to reliably understand who this person is, what they are trying to do, and what has already happened? That keeps the problem bounded and avoids boiling the ocean. And the second one is, what I've seen in our experience, for AI customer journey, we always need identity, some key attributes, and also very important is the recent interaction context. and that needs to be accurate and timely. We don't need every historical field, but we need the data that fits the purpose. And the third one is the joint ownership around these critical data elements. Particularly within healthcare, that means business, clinical teams, and IT agreeing that which system is the source of truth. Right? That is historically been a challenging area in the healthcare industry because of multiple systems who does the same type of work. So the source of truth is very important. And the fourth one is the quality checks where the data is created, not just in the downstream warehouses, but even upstream. Required fields. What are the valid values in each of those fields, and then the cross system reconciliation, because health plan or provider operate on so many different systems, right? We need to have that cross system reconciliation, otherwise it will still remain fragmented. And finally, we need to close the loop between AI and data quality. When the model uses the wrong data, it obviously surfaces wrong recommendation, and then it will force the humans, whether it is the contact center associates or the clinicians, they will end up overriding it every time if the wrong data is used to train the model. And uh, um, and that monitoring mechanism needs to be there even after the AI is deployed, to treat those overrides as signal about data issues and go back and feed it into the upstream process to solve for the data problem. So if all these things can be done, in tandem, we can solve for the data quality issues.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great way of breaking it down. Some really good examples in there as well. Yeah, I was going to say I'm surprised nobody voted for compliance in our poll, but obviously that's kind of always a big variable here. So we did get another question on that. So the question is, considering the extensive regulatory and privacy requirements in healthcare, such as HIPAA and state laws, what factors might explain why compliance and risk concerns did not surface on this poll? I mean, my initial thought was just everyone's so used to compliance being a challenge that, we're kind of thinking about these other things a little bit more pertinently. But yeah, it brings up an interesting question, especially because another question we had was balancing compliance with with speed, sorry. So yeah, Jimmy, maybe you have some thoughts.
Yeah, that's great insight, and a little shocked at that as well. And I only have a couple of guesses. First is that it means everybody is working great with our IT and InfoSec, so cybersecurity teams on data privacy already and software that, or you haven't been hit with it yet. So, like I said, the stat I gave up at the beginning of the call, not healthcare, but industry related, there's 700 companies at this time, or excuse me, in 2025, that have lawsuits against them for misuse of AI. And that's probably because they didn't plan ahead. So they did scale it across the enterprise, but they didn't do those human in the loop checks. They didn't do the validation checks, all the security checks, HIPAA checks. So, so I guess one possible answer is because they haven't been hit with it yet. Or the second answer would be is you have really already partnered with IT to solve for these things, but it is real. Those numbers, I think, is going up to 2,000 companies next year, or this year we're in 2026, of lawsuits about misuse of AI. So again, like I mentioned at the top of the call, I'm passionate about healthcare. I'm an IT guy, but I'm very passionate about healthcare. And I know from experience that, trust, integrity is your highest value currency that you have. So it has to be solved. So I am curious. I am, that 17% only, excuse me, privacy risk concerns was 0% actually on this survey. So maybe it's because it was the last option. I'm not sure. But if anyone else would drop in the chat any perspectives, I'd love to see that or hear that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I had a conversation recently where someone brought up the point that in regulated industries, it's actually easier to set rules for AI because the rules have already been created industry wide. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So maybe something there. But yeah, curious if anyone else has thoughts. In the meantime, we had one more question, and again, we have about a few minutes left. If anyone has any late breaking questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But so what metrics actually do matter to the board? And I'm assuming board here, just executive board or board of advisors. So what are the metrics that your stakeholders are really looking for with these change initiatives?
Okay. I have my point of view, but Rajesh, since you're a client partner, if you had anything you want to interject first, I will turn this one to you.
See, from the healthcare context, I'll give you an example, right? One of the health systems try to implement AI to answer basic questions on the appointment availability and the service related questions, but they did it in a fragmented way in the POC. But during the POC, it met all the metrics. They were able to divert a certain percentage of the calls to the solution AI agent. But when they moved this into the actual production deployment, that's where the actual challenges are faced. What they have not done, again, it goes back to the 5 challenges that Jimmy talked about in the beginning, right? What they haven't done is clearly define the handoff between the AI chat agent and the contact center agent. So what ended up happening is, even though the AI agent in isolation is able to handle certain number of calls, which met the criteria, but their overall contacts has not gone down. And actually, it created the customer satisfaction issues, because when the customer called and said, "Hey, I asked about this appointment," or whatever, the contact center agents doesn't have a track of it, right? So the outcomes, the metrics that needs to be defined from the point of view of the overall journey of whether it is a patient or member, and those should be the outcomes that matter. So if I take it cannot be just how many the chat is handling. It needs to be, for example, the customer satisfaction or reduction in the repeat calls. Those are just some examples, right? So that's a philosophy that needs to be applied. Again, I'm using the customer service example, but there could be some other outcomes that matter for the claims than just the turnaround time. That's my perspective on it, Jimmy.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's kind of one of the points I was going to make, is that if you fail to design up front a good patient journey, customer journey up front to know what experiences are already causing friction, and then you solve for those, that's how you do it. However, if you don't clearly define what you're trying to solve or enhance with the AI or any technology, then you may be solving for something that was never giving you bad promoter scores in the first place. And the customer contact scheduling, what you just mentioned, Rajesh, is a fantastic example. Say like if you had folks manually calling in for appointments or whatever, there was no self-service at all. So you weren't really being scored on that in the first place. And unless you went out and asked for the customer satisfaction. And now you put up an omni-channel platform where folks can engage, chat, email, voice, self-service. Now you got a new potential friction point. It may help you be more efficient, but it was a friction point that was not exposed you weren't even asking for those CSAT scores around that experience. So I think you really have to kind of take a good look at it. If, for example, folks are looking for more self-service, especially the younger generation coming through, they want to, be able to go through all these different channels and have a 360 view. So I think, when I look long term, what success look like is really, you already said it, it's the CSAT. There's really no better way to quantify that. If you're quantifying it from cost reduction, that doesn't that'll be great for your bottom line on the balance sheet, but is that really improving customers' experience? Probably not. So I think your biggest success factor, in my opinion, is your CSAT, customer experience, but you have to quantify that, right? And how do you quantify that? A pain point or friction point. They say, I'm tired of waiting. But CCW mentioned this on the call earlier. The wait times going person to person, entering different forms. I've already done this. So if you do, like I would look at this as an example. I'd say, well, wow, let's look at some, self-service around this. I'm already getting, some bad scores around this. So then we kind of put that in place where you create a self-service technology platform where they can do those things automatically and contained. Success around that, as an example, just kind of go a little further on that, is like if 100% of your interactions were coming into your call centers as manual and talking to a human, and you can actually put in some self-service and solve for 50% of that with self-service and containment, that's definitely a success measure, and it's cost cutting and an improved customer experience at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I really like the point you made about not solving for, problems that don't exist. I think that's a very a resonant one. But yeah, thank you. I know, we're just about at time. So I did want to point folks to the resources to learn a little bit more about what we talked about and maybe just kind of, put some words behind it. I think that might be helpful to learn a little bit more. Obviously, you can always reach out to CCW Digital on LinkedIn, and we're happy to answer any questions after the call. But yeah, we thank you so much for joining. This has been a really great discussion, and hopefully one that you all found valuable. And yeah, really happy to have Sutherland here. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Rajesh. It's been a good one.
Great. And if anyone wants to have further conversation, I'd be glad to talk to you on LinkedIn. It's easy to find Jimmy Guest. It's an uncommon name, but I really enjoyed this session, and I was really looking forward to it. Like I said, healthcare is a passion of mine, so it's been great to have this conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.